Welcome back to another episode of Thinking Critically. Today I'm joined by Ty Burr, who is a film critic and pop culture columnist for the Boston Globe for 2 decades now. From 2002 to 2021, he currently writes Ty Burr's Watch List, a popular e-newsletter for movie and TV recommendations. He is the author of the critically acclaimed books Gods Like Us on Movie Stardom and Modern Fame, The Best Old Movies for Families, and the 50 Movie Starter Kit. What to know if you want to know what you're talking about. As a senior writer and editor for Weekly throughout the 90s, he wrote reviews and features and oversaw the magazine's initial coverage of the internet and new media. A member of the National Society of Film Critics and the Boston Society of Film Critics, he teaches courses in film and criticism at Boston University and Emerson College. In 2017, he was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Criticism. Anyway, Ty, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
absolutely. It's a pleasure, and I'm super excited to get into the conversation today. It's a little bit divergent from the material that I normally cover on the show, but as a fan of movies, I couldn't pass up the opportunity because I'm a huge cinephile myself. So I'm excited to dig in here to the content. But I always like to start off with kind of your origin story of interest. So that is exactly how did you become interested in movies?
Oh, well, that's a as with anybody who does this for a living, it's a personal story, and it goes back to when we were all young. In my case, well, my father passed away when I was quite young, and when I was 14, my mother said, "Hey, there's a movie coming on TV tonight at midnight. That was your dad's favorite movie. You should, stay up and watch it." And it was a Marx Brothers movie called Duck Soup, and I had never watched an old movie before. I don't know if I purposefully sat down to watch a black and white movie before, but I'd never seen anything like this. And and it wasn't just sort of the connection with my dad, but also opening a window to this whole world of classic movies. So in my teenage years, I was also lucky to be growing up in Boston at a time when the revival movie house boom was going on. So there'd be all these theaters that would be showing double bills of classic films like, African Queen or Bringing Up Baby, but also midnight movies like Rocky Horror Picture Show and Harold and Maude. It was a great time to be growing up, going to the movies.
Hmm.
It was also a good time to be growing up reading film criticism because Pauline Kael was still writing in the New Yorker, and she was a hugely formative experience, hugely formative um, influence on me as a critic and on many, many, many others. And not to mention others who were writing criticism at the time, as well as music criticism. It was kind of a boom time for rock criticism as well. So all those voices were sort of circulating. So I was watching a lot of movies. I was writing a lot of movies, writing about a lot of movies. I went to college and ended up being a film studies major. And probably, to the amusement of my mom, I actually ended up making a living at it. And and got out of college and ended up working at Home Box Office actually during the 1980s as a researcher and a programmer, putting movies and sort of an in-house movie critic. From there, I jumped to Entertainment Weekly, pretty much as that magazine was starting out in 1991, and came on board as their video critic. At that point, video movies were coming out on video like as much as a year after they were in theaters. So it made sense to sort of think about them differently and combine different movies together and talk about them that way. And then in 2002, I got offered the chance to come back to Boston, which is where I grew up. I'd been living in New York, and be one of the movie critics at the Boston Globe alongside Wesley Morris, who's now at the Times. And I was there for 19 years. And for a variety of reasons, which I can discuss, I decided I wanted to try something new.
Hmm. Well, fantastic. So when you were in college, so you said you were a film studies
Yeah.
major in college. Now, did you always know that you kind of wanted to go to the critic route, or was it more of, I'm just kind of interested in films in general at the moment, and I'm not exactly sure what I want to do. So I guess how did you decide that you wanted to become a critic, that this is what you wanted to do?
When you are studying film at college, there's a pretty clear divide between the people who want to make it and the people who want to write about it. There's overlap, but and in some schools, like at NYU, that's absolutely formalized, and they're not even in the same building. Cinema studies and film and TV, which I think is actually a shame. Um, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Ah, so I always was interested in the history. I was always interested in conversations about them. I did make some student films and had fun doing that, but that aspect never really engaged me the way that writing about film and popular culture in general really engaged me. I like to have those conversations on paper and with people.
Okay. So it was okay. So you made some films and you're like, this isn't quite my cup of tea, but the writing aspect of it really appealed to you, is what you're saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, writing
Okay.
about them exactly.
Okay. And
And I
then you're
did
like,
have
okay.
friends in college who went off on to become cameramen and set designers and directors. And they just knew early on they wanted to get their hands dirty in the nuts and bolts of making them.
Hmm. Now, since you had an affinity for the writing aspect of it, did you ever consider perhaps really like perhaps screenplay or something like that, where you were actually writing the stories?
I wrote
Or
some screenplays when I was
yeah.
in my 20s and 30s, and they were not very good. Let's just
Okay, I see.
say that. Some people have the
Okay.
knack for writing dialogue. I do not have the knack for writing dialogue.
Okay.
Um, and you learn what your strong suits are.
And I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, when you're younger, it's kind of about experimentation, figuring
Mhm.
out what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at. And sometimes things that you really love, and if you're not very good at it, you can't, unfortunately, you can't make a living off of it.
No,
And you really
and
have to play into your strong suits. And that's okay. I mean, if you really love something and you work really hard at it, and at the end of the day, you're still not that great at it, you can always just keep it as a hobby.
yeah, and it also
Yeah.
has made me absolutely appreciate the well-written screenplay, the people who can do it,
Hmm.
and do have that ear and that ability to create characters on page that then become alive on the screen.
Yeah, and as you know, the screenplay is so important too. I mean, the writing can really make or break a movie.
Mhm.
And I love movies, as I said, I said not too long ago. And there's a number of very well directed, visually stunning movies out there. I'm thinking more towards like the DC movies or Marvel movies. And just the writing wasn't there. And I think the movies are great from a directing standpoint, the acting, but if the writing isn't very good, the movie just kind of falls apart.
To me, the most extreme example of that, and I guess it's a moot point because it's the most successful movie ever released, is Avatar,
Okay.
which is a terrible script. It just is a
No, yeah.
script, but it doesn't matter. It created this world that millions of people wanted to dive into, and presumably will again when the sequel comes out later this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting about that movie is I couldn't agree with you more. I think from a visual standpoint, it's absolutely breathtaking, Avatar and what they were, what I think it was directed by James Cameron, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
and pushing the envelope from the visual aspect of it. But it was essentially like Dances with Wolves from the 1990s, that Kevin Costner movie of you have a foreigner going in,
Yep.
and then it's just like it was almost the same exact movie, but you have it with an alien race on a different planet, it seems like.
I think I actually said that in my review of Avatar, that it is the same movie as Dances with Wolves.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
So
funny.
yeah, it was much noted at the time.
Yeah, I had that epiphany when I saw it. I was like, it's like this is Dances with Wolves, except you have blue aliens.
Yeah. And I guess that's all that mattered for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. I mean, when that movie came out, Dances with Wolves was 20 years old at that point. So,
That's right.
yeah. Anyway, okay, all right. So you're a film critic. You love writing. That's what appeals to you about this whole space.
Mhm.
I need to know, because obviously you're a huge fan of movies. What are some of your all-time favorites?
Um, well, when you are a professional movie reviewer, you get asked that question a lot. It's
I
often
can
like
imagine. I can
the first
imagine.
thing
Yeah.
people ask. Um, so I do have an answer, and I actually have two movies. And it's true, they're like my two favorite movies, and one of them is the one everybody's heard of. And that's kind of what, when somebody asks you that, they kind of want to hear an answer that is like a movie they might have heard of at least,
Hmm.
and maybe have even seen and can kind of go, oh yeah, that tracks. And the other one is one that nobody's heard of, or very few people have heard of, but and that's not why I picked it. I just love it. It just happens to be kind of obscure. The one everybody has heard of is The Godfather. To
Okay.
me, that is a perfect film. You could not improve on it, which is kind of hilarious when you knew how chaotic the production of it was.
Hmm.
And there are many stories like that. Casablanca is another example that people think of as a perfect film. That was a train wreck when they were making it, but somehow it all comes together. But The Godfather for me is like, especially now that it's 50 years old now, it's kind of the dividing line between classic Hollywood and the modern era. In terms of genre, in terms of on-screen violence, um, in terms of performance, it's just, and it still holds up. It plays slowly, I think, by today's standards. It played slowly, kind of slowly back then, but it draws you in. It's so rich in theme, in performance. I just think of that scene with Al Pacino looking at his steady hand holding the lighter and realizing, oh, I've got what it takes to be the next Don Corleone.
Yeah.
Just all those little magic moments. I could watch that movie and have watched it many, many times. The one that nobody has heard of, although it's actually finally, after decades of being unavailable in the United States, is actually on the Criterion Channel now and has been released on a Criterion disc. And it is a French film from 1974 called Celine and Julie Go Boating. And I love it so much, I even have a phone case with a shot from it. And it
That's
is
too
by
funny.
a French director named Jacques Rivette. He's probably the least known member of the French New Wave that produced Truffaut and Godard and Chabrol and all these, celebrated French directors of the 60s.
Okay.
And it's about two women who become friends in Paris in August when nobody else is in Paris because they're all on vacation. And it's kind of a Alice in Wonderland tale where they discover a house, kind of like a Charlie Kaufman meta movie 3 decades ahead of schedule. They discover a house in which it's a house of fiction. The same story happens inside that house every day without change. It's like when you pick up a novel, the same story, whenever you pick it up. Except at the end of the day, a little girl ends up dead, and they decide they're going to somehow monkey wrench their way into this house of fiction and change what happens. And it's a delightful comedy, but it's very, very French, and it's 3 hours long. And for the first half, nothing seems to be happening. And then some things start to happen, and it's one of those movies that just magically pulls itself together in ways that you didn't imagine a movie could, and in the process becomes very much an essay about how we watch movies and how we how we consume stories,
Hmm.
not just in books but also on screen. It's a lovely film. I highly recommend it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it sounds fascinating. And when you say it's very French, what exactly does that mean? I mean, obviously it's a French film. I mean,
Um,
did the French during that time period have a very particular style that they produced
well, I'm thinking
movies?
of the fact that it is it's quite it's not plot driven, although at a certain point it becomes quite plot driven.
Hmm.
But it's more about atmosphere and character. And as I said, for the first half of it, you're just following these women around Paris as they're sort of monkey wrenching each other and having fun, and you're not sure where it's going.
Hmm.
And I would imagine that an American audience or any audience used to commercial Hollywood movies is going to get frustrated with that. Um,
Okay.
and a lot of international films tell their stories at a slower and more less obvious pace. And I don't mind, I like the Hollywood films, but I like those too. But you have to slow down your metabolism and just let the film happen.
I
Um,
see.
and it will take you interesting places.
All right, I think I definitely have to check that one out. I mean, of course, I've seen The Godfather, but this other French movie that you mentioned, I have not seen.
Right.
Yeah. And who doesn't love The Godfather? Oh my goodness, what a classic.
I actually spoke to somebody the other day who had not seen it, which struck me because it is one of those movies that you sort of have to check off if you want to say you love movies.
Yeah, out of all of the kind of gangster-oriented or mafia-oriented
Mhm.
types of movies of the past, decades, The Godfather is the pinnacle. Like that's the one that you need to watch.
Right. I mean, the
Yeah.
Sopranos wouldn't exist without it, um,
Yeah.
and so much of what we think of as, you know, media gangster culture, including real life gangsters who took their, mafia men who took their cues from the movie.
Hmm.
So it's a case of life imitating art.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, so those are your favorite movies. Now, I'm curious to hear, do you have a short list of directors that you are kind of always impressed by the movies
Oh,
that they make? Yeah.
sure. Sure. I mean, and the classic era and the modern era and all the eras in between. The classic era, I think Howard Hawks was the greatest director of the Hollywood classic era. Um, I think that I'm always interested in what Scorsese is going to do. Um,
Scorsese,
and,
yeah,
and,
he's
and,
brilliant.
and, and I do feel he is unfairly tagged by, oh, he only makes gangster movies. It's absolutely true. And, one of these days watch Silence, which is about, um, you know, priests in medieval Japan. Um, that's about as far from gangster movies as you can get.
Oh, wow.
Um, there are whenever anybody asks me about specific movies or directors, every title and name flies out of my head. Todd Haynes. Todd Haynes is a
Okay.
director who I think I'll watch anything he does. He always surprises me, and he always brings incredible technique and a lot of emotion to his films. Um, I'm trying to think. Claire Denis is a French director. I'm just finishing watching her latest movie. It's not maybe not her best. It's called Stars at Noon,
Hmm.
but she is always going to do something interesting and offbeat. We'll take a genre film, like her last film was a science fiction film with Robert Pattinson, but fill it with atmosphere and emotions that you can't quite put a label on. David Lynch, I'll watch anything he does, even when it's way out there, because I think he takes chances that that hardly anybody does. You
Hmm. Interesting. There's some directors in there that I actually haven't heard of, so I think I'm gonna have to go back when we get done with this, when we get done with our discussion here, and I'm gonna have to look these directors up because
know.
I'm always kind of on the search for new directors and the movies that they've made, just because I'm interested. I like being entertained. I love movies, so
Mhm.
I'll definitely have to check some of those people out.
Oh, I love, you know what, I love being entertained too. And that's, again, another sort of false idea that people have that, movie critics just sit there with their monocles and their ascots and just want to just only watch, documentaries about, I don't know, obscure documentaries about tractor pulls, but no, we love to be entertained. We got into this business because we love movies.
Hmm.
One director who I absolutely adore, who's making movies right now, is a guy named Ryan Johnson,
Okay.
who made Knives Out. He made this.
Ah,
He
okay.
made uh, um, the Last Jedi, which is the Star Wars movie that all these hardcore Star Wars fans hate and everybody else loves. I think it's actually the best directed of all the Wars movies. He did a great little film noir set in a modern high school movie called Brick. He's just terrific. And he's got a new Knives Out movie coming out called Glass Onion with Daniel Craig. He is somebody who can go make a genre film, but like a mystery, like Knives Out, uh, but fill it up with wit and cleverness and new ideas and just really revive it. And I don't think there are many people who he just really enjoys making movies, and you can tell that because his movies are really enjoyable to watch.
So I have heard of Knives Out,
Yes.
and I've heard wonderful things about it, and I still haven't watched it yet. And it's
Oh, you should.
definitely, I think it's saved to my list on Amazon,
Mhm.
and I definitely need to watch it. But I've heard good things about it.
Yeah.
You said it's great, so I'm gonna have to go watch that
Yeah, and watch it
now.
before the sequel comes out, which is going pretty much straight to Netflix, which is a whole subject we can talk about it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, so as a critic, what factors are movies graded on? So when you sit down and you're asked to, essentially, yeah, grade a movie or rate a movie, what are you looking for exactly?
It's a good question. And basically, I want the movie to be the best movie it's trying to be. And I sit down with an absolute blank slate in mind. And I actually try to avoid articles before I go in. I'll know who the director is and know who the actors are, but I don't want to read anything that's going to predispose me one way or the other. I actually try to avoid movie trailers for that reason, because movie trailers often lie about the movie and are cut to not actually give you an impression of what the movie actually is, but to sell tickets, to get butts in seats. So they can be wildly misleading. So I avoid them. I spend like the first 15 minutes just letting the movie happen. And I never want to lose that too. You just let the movie happen and you figure, oh, this is the movie it's trying to be. Whether it's just pure entertainment or something more serious or something that looks like entertainment but has something else going on in it, is trying to be a little subversive. And then you start thinking, you just start watching it and almost grading it against itself. Grading it against, okay, here's what you want to be. Are you doing it? Are you sort of going beyond? Are you falling short? And like I said, you almost like divide your brain in half. Half of your brain is just letting the movie happen and enjoying it or being engaged in it and just watching it the way we watch movies. And the other half is taking notes and sort of noticing, the score is pretty good here, or really, overbearing here. That's a really good performance, or the camera work's really impressive, and brings out certain things. I saw this new movie last night at a screening called Till. It's the Emmett Till story, about the young African-American boy, 14-year-old boy, who was killed by whites in the South in 1955, and his led to a lot of protests and activism and civil rights legislation. It was directed with a camera style that was really quite intimate and brought out a lot of nuance in how these people are reacting to the situation. It's really about his mother, who was quite instrumental in drawing attention to what had happened to him and making it a national story. And she's played by an actress who's new to me named Danielle Deadweiler, who's fantastic. I think she's probably going to get some awards nominations. But the way that the camera work stayed close to her and picked up just nuances of movement and emotion, so I noticed that. And that's something that when I write about the film, I am going to talk about how that camera work is really important to how, not just how the story is told, but the emotions that it conjures up.
I see. So you're looking for, you're looking at the camera work, you're looking at the acting, you're looking at the score. Is there like a set checklist that you kind of go through, or is it more of just from experience of looking at, hundreds of films at this point, and like you said, just taking the film and asking yourself, what exactly is this film trying to be, and is it doing a good job at that?
I don't have a checklist, but I let myself notice things that are working, that aren't working. So I will notice the camera work, and I will notice the score, and I'll notice the production design, the look of a film. That's something that people don't really think about, but every movie has a production designer who's responsible not just for the sets, but really the whole look of the film, aside from the actual camera cinematography. And those two work together. So you just, I've been doing this for 35, 40 years now. You train yourself to let yourself notice things, but you're not sitting forward, checking things off. I do take notes in the dark. I mostly write down bits of dialogue that I think I might want to quote in the review while it's still fresh in my mind. And sometimes just, sort of write down my reactions as it's happening in handwriting that is an absolute mess that I can't read later, but I try. But funny. We all do take notes.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I ask is because I'm really curious, because I'm not familiar with the critic process. And as a science-oriented individual, what I do is very particular. Like there's a set checklist, there's a set methodology of how you do things, and the goal is to be as objective as possible. Now, the movies, drama, theater, things like that. These are art forms.
Yes,
And with art forms, human expression, creativity, it's very difficult to lump that into an objectivity type of box.
right,
And everyone's going to watch a movie differently. It's
right,
going to resonate with them differently.
correct.
So I was just curious as to like how it is that a movie critic tries to be objective in a
We don't.
sense when it comes to, or you don't at all.
We
You
don't.
just, okay,
No, there's no such thing as a subjective movie review, um,
okay,
because I, I'm a subject. I mean, I have my own way, as you just said, I have my own way of seeing it. The trick is to be honest about your subjectivity and to know your blind spots and know what you respond to, and
hmm
be honest with yourself as you're processing it. But that's not all that goes into a movie review or any review, any piece of criticism. There's also a lot of information. There's context. And so on one hand, I'm trying to write, get the reader to relive my subjective experience of watching the movie. But I'm
okay,
also giving them a ton of context. And I think of a review as as a taco of objective context surrounding a subjective opinion.
I see.
So objective context meaning what's it about? What has the director done before that's relevant? If it's relevant, what have the actors done before? If that's relevant, if the is stories based on truth, such as Till, the movie I saw last night, give the basics of the story, and maybe note where again, if it's relevant, if the movie departs from the facts in ways that are um, worth mentioning,
hmm
uh, bring that up. In other words, bring enough information for the reader to understand not just the experience of watching the movie, but what's everything that's surrounding it, which may include some cultural conversation as well. So every review has a different shape. Every review I'm talking, I may mention the music and the cinematography, but I'm coming at it from a different angle every single time.
And what I think, going back to the subjective versus objectivity, and I was just thinking about this as you were talking now. I think part of what makes art, so whether that's film or actually like paintings or anything like that, so enjoyable, at least for me, maybe you as well, is the subjectivity of it. Is that it's just me and I get to enjoy this piece of human creativity. And I can sit there in my own little world and just enjoy it. And I mean, I can analyze it, I suppose, and try to be objective, but sometimes it's just fun to be entertained, as we were talking
Right,
about earlier,
correct.
and just kind of taking it all in.
Yeah, right. And sometimes it's enjoyable, even if it's not a movie that specifically out to entertain. Just let it happen. Let the experience of it happen, and analyze it later. I think sometimes you go into a movie saying, "What's the symbolism about?" And
hmm
I know very few filmmakers who really set out to, well, this is going to mean this, and this is going to mean that. It's more about emotional states, recreating emotional states. I think somebody like David Lynch for instance, is particularly good at that. But you mentioned, you know, watching it for yourself, and we do, but let's not forget that movies were really made to be watched in a theater with a crowd, and as part of a group. And I think there's nothing that can replace, and I don't think it is going to get replaced, although it's going through changes. Nothing can replace that feeling of being in a packed theater where everybody is just, almost more than the sum of its parts, just having this reaction to a great movie. Whether it's a scary movie, a funny movie, a drama, but the feeling, the emotions that sort of just connect and spark in that crowded room, it's just a totally special thing, and you cannot replicate it. And I think it's hardwired into the human experience. I think it goes back to the campfire around, the cavemen around the
Yeah,
campfire telling the stories of the hunt. We want to experience stories as part of a crowd.
no, absolutely. And like you just said there, it's definitely hardwired into us, wanting to be around other people and being entertained in groups. I categorically agree what you said about the movie theater never going away. I can't imagine. I know that it is going through some changes, but there is just something about the movie theater experience that you cannot replicate. At least I haven't seen any sort of other technologies replicate it to the degree that going to the theater, walking in with your group,
Mhm.
going to the concession stands, getting some popcorn, some freshly popped popcorn, the smells, sitting down in the seats and the big screen. It's cool, it's dark, and then just sitting together and enjoying a movie.
Yeah.
And I know particularly when it comes to comedies, if I were to watch a comedy by myself, I am going to laugh significantly less versus if I'm
Right.
watching a comedy with other
Right.
people. And it's because, like you were just saying there, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's
Correct.
all of these humans interacting with each other, being close, enjoying the entertainment together.
Right.
It
And
really
laughter,
makes,
yeah, laughter's infectious. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah,
Um,
no,
yeah.
it's a
I
wonderful experience.
the new movie Bros, the gay romantic comedy.
Okay.
I've seen it twice in a theater. And I can imagine that movie. It's very, very funny, and it is exactly the kind of movie that gets audience laughing because the lines are so witty that it's got a lot of good jokes, and it's a great movie to see with an audience because it's funny and it's
Mhm.
fun, and it would be a very different experience watching that at home by yourself. I mean, forget the obvious things. You can't wholly focus on it in the dark the way you do in a movie theater because you're looking at your phone and you're getting up to go to the bathroom and go get some food and that experience we're not giving 100% of our attention to it at home. We never do. So as much as I understand why we're all watching at home these days and appreciate how good some of the TV shows are now, I do not think that crowd experience is going to go away.
No, I completely agree. It's definitely not the same watching at home versus the movie theater experience. And I like what you said there too about the distraction aspect of it, because I know that I'm definitely distracted by my phone when I watch things at home.
Yep.
And I'm always searching for something that can capture my attention more, it seems like, when I'm supposed to be watching the TV, being entertained there, but then I'm scrolling on my phone through some sort of social media nonsense or something like that, trying to be more entertained, so to speak. Yeah,
It's a universal condition, and
yeah,
for something like that movie I was talking about, Celine and Julie, it's death to a movie like that.
yeah.
You have to like turn off the lights and let that movie just kind of happen on its own rhythm and not be distracted. So that's one reason I feel like a lot of mainstream movies are so fast and so in your face with lots of action, lots of CGI, is to keep you from looking at your phone.
Yeah. So it doesn't happen to me in theaters, but like what you just said there, the newer movies, the directing styles trying to just keep you super engaged because
Yep.
they have to compete with your smart device. And it never happens to me in the theaters. Maybe it happens for other people in the theaters more than me, but I know that when I go into the theater, it's sacrosanct. And you know how they have the like the warning
Yep.
message, or whatever, uh, make sure to silence your cell phones. I always do that. I always make sure to silence it. I put it away, and I'm like, I'm not looking at this until the end of the movie, and I just let myself sit back in that seat and just be taken in by the experience.
Well, you are an increasing rarity because I see people pull out their smartphones in movies at all.
Do they?
What did I just see? I saw Amsterdam the other week. Went out with my wife to see Amsterdam, the new David O. Russell movie with Christian Bale. And it's a weird movie. It's kind of wacky, and um, there are parts that work, and there's some dead spots in it. And when one of the dead spots, the woman next to me, not my wife, she was on the other side, pulls out her phone and starts scrolling through her phone for like 10, 15 minutes. And I leaned over and said, can you not do that? And she grumbled and put it away, um, but no, that was totally okay behavior as far as she was concerned.
Yeah. Those those devices, they're just so addictive, and they're specifically designed to be that way. So
Right. Correct.
so I can see that the movie industry is definitely having to compete with them, and it's a bit of a shame because that's when they have to compete. then that's going to direct, like you said, it's going to direct how the movies are created.
Mhm.
And you're going to then show like a preference towards certain directing styles
Mhm.
versus others. And if those certain directing styles, if they, if they are are more popular than other types of maybe noirs or dramas or something that are very good movies, but they're just different directing styles. Those are You're just going to basically have a funneling towards one. You're not going to have a whole lot of diversity, is what I'm trying to say. You're going to have a decrease in diversity.
Right, right. Well, we've seen that. What I've seen over the 20 years I was at the Boston Globe was the splitting of the movie industry, and by that I mean making them, distributing them, showing them into two separate, almost completely separate tracks. There's the studio to multiplex channel, which is mostly franchise properties, comic book movies, Fast and Furious sequels, more Star Wars movies, whatever is familiar. Lots of action, lots of digital effects. Those are made by the major studios. They are distributed by the major studios, and they go to the multiplexes.
Hmm.
Uh, and and then there's what I sort of think of as the independent route, what we used to call the art houses, but all the movies we used to call movies, dramas, comedies, romances, suspense thrillers, just movies. Those don't often get to the multiplex anymore. They are made by independent production companies, sometimes the independent wing of a major studio. They have a completely different distribution mechanism. They often roll out at film festivals like Sundance or Toronto, where they're first seen by people like me who start the drumbeat of hype going, hopefully. And then they will come to independent theaters, with some overlap in the multiplexes, but they will, go to the sort of the hip downtown theaters, or those the old independent theaters that a lot of towns still have, and they're told differently. They've got a different style, and they reach a different audience. And the only thing that sort of brings them back together is that everything ends up on streaming again.
Hmm.
So that I do think that audiences do have a chance to see some of these different kind of movies, even if they don't live near an independent theater. And that includes international films as well.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, I think it's quite telling that a foreign language film won the Best Picture Oscar a couple of years ago for the first time ever. Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, uh,
Hmm.
which is a
Yeah.
pretty ruthlessly funny satire. But I mean, that says something about the changing Motion Picture Academy, but it also speaks to the fact that a movie like that, which would never have gone beyond the art houses and the independent theaters, is permeating a larger consciousness, and I think primarily through streaming.
So I guess there's pros and cons to technology then.
Yes, there is.
So yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to technology, and I think technology innovations in the movie industry, it's clearly no different because
Mm-hmm.
every aspect of society where there's new technology, it always seems like there's pros and cons. It just kind of have to give and take.
And a hell of a learning curve.
Oh yeah, definitely. So so what films are you most excited about this year? So
Um, there's a lot of stuff. It's been an odd year. The industry is still coming out of COVID and trying to figure out, and the top moneymaker of the year was a sequel, of course. It was the Top Gun sequel, Maverick. Although when the new Avatar film comes out, that may top that. Um, One of my favorite movies of the year has actually been playing since, I think, earlier in the year, and it's still playing in theaters, including some multiplexes. And it's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. Have you ever heard of that movie?
so
Um,
I have heard about it and I've heard wonderful things, but I have not gotten around to seeing it yet.
it is a wonderful movie. It's absolutely crazy. You might have to see it twice just to pick up on everything that's happening in it. It stars Michelle Yeoh, who American audiences would know from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragons, one of the great Hong Kong action stars. And she plays a immigrant Chinese woman in America who runs a laundromat and whose life is a total train wreck and is miserable, and then discovers that in a parallel universe she's actually a brilliant scientist who's invented something that's going to potentially destroy every universe. And then in another parallel universe, this is a movie where there's infinite parallel universes,
Okay.
including one in which she's basically Michelle Yeoh, a famous movie star, action star. And it's really funny. It stars as her husband, an actor the actor whose name escapes me right now, who was in the Goonies as a child and in the Indiana Jones movie as a child. He's all grown up now, and he's tremendous. It's funny. It's crazy. There's a lot going on in it. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's actually closing in on 100 million U.S. box office, which is kind of amazing for a small movie like that. So I wish more people would see that. And that's been around all year, and it's still playing theaters. But there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out because it's that time of year where the studios roll out their serious movies. There's one opening this week, Friday, called The Banshees of Inisherin, which is written and directed by Martin McDonagh, who gave us 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not.
Oscars, a couple of years ago. Stars Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson as 2 friends in Ireland. It's set on the Isles of Iran. It's a beautiful setting. 2 friends who start feuding, and the feud just starts escalating and escalating and escalating. It's very funny and often quite shocking. And Martin McDonagh, he's a brilliant writer. He's written plays that have played on Broadway, but he's also quite hilarious. So that, I think, I'm looking forward to people discovering that. There's that new Knives Out movie, Glass Onion. And when you do see Knives Out, you will be hopefully highly amused by what Daniel Craig, that very serious British actor who's also James Bond. Well, he plays the detective in both the movies, who has got this Southern fried accent. His name is Benoit Blanc, and he's just hamming it to the skies. And that's one of the reasons the movie's so enjoyable, is that great actors, when they decide that they're just going to ham it up, can be so much fun. And he's a delight in both the movies. So the new one is called Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. It's got Edward Norton, Kate Hudson, Janelle Monáe. It's got a good cast. And it's just about as funny as the original. What else is coming out? There is White Noise, an adaptation of the novel by Don DeLillo from the 80s, directed by Noah Baumbach, who made A Marriage Story a couple of years ago, starring Adam Driver. It's got a really good cast. I haven't seen that one yet. Set in the modern day, about a family that's in a modern day that's kind of teetering on the edge of an apocalypse, which sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? I feel like, that's our reality at the moment. What else is coming? There's plenty of good films. Steven Spielberg has a movie that's his first autobiographical film. It's called The Fabelmans. It's a fictionalized version of himself, a kid growing up in California, making Super 8 World War II epics in his backyard while his parents are getting divorced, played by Michelle Williams and Paul Dano. I have seen that. It's a lovely film, written by Tony Kushner, the great playwright, who's worked with, who wrote Lincoln for Spielberg. He's written a lot of good things. And Spielberg, one of the great things about Spielberg is that you sit down to watch his movies and you're in good hands. You're in the hands of a classical narrative master. And that's the truth. That's true of this film too. But this one obviously carries a little extra charge of emotion because he's talking about his parents here. Clearly, there's still a lot of emotion there. So yeah, those are some of the ones that I'm looking forward to.
Very interesting. And I really like what you said there about Spielberg, because I think that everybody knows who Steven Spielberg is. I mean, he's been making good films for like 50 years now.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, Jaws was the first big blockbuster where you would actually go back to the theater and see the movie more than once, which was, I guess, unheard of for the time. That was a Spielberg flick, and that came out in the late 70s.
77. No,
Yeah.
excuse me, 76, 75, 75.
Oh, was it mid 70s? Oh
It
my
was mid
goodness.
70s. Then
Okay.
Star Wars came out in 77, and those two changed the movie world and the culture too. But Spielberg was making TV. He's like making Twilight Night Gallery episodes as early as the early 70s, and he made a very, very good TV movie called Duel,
Hmm.
with Dennis Weaver. That was his first feature film that you can get on disc. He's coming up on 60 years in the business.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and he's been consistently good
Yes.
for that long. I mean, you're talking about somebody who is just a master of his craft,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm always looking forward to whatever it is that he's producing. I mean, one of my all-time favorite movies from when I was a kid was Jurassic Park because who doesn't love dinosaurs?
Of course.
And like, yeah, who doesn't love dinosaurs when you're a kid? And it's like
Yeah,
Jurassic Park is just a wonderful movie beyond the fact that it's surrounding dinosaurs, but it was just very well put together.
exactly. He is
So,
the argument. Spielberg is really the best argument for the classical narrative cinema, um,
mhm.
and that he makes it look so easy. It's so enjoyable. And one thing, again, it's something that I think people don't appreciate about people like me, who review movies for a living, is that we're not necessarily looking for art, and we're not always looking for entertainment. Like I said, you look to the film to be what it wants to be, but we really we do appreciate craft. We
Hmm.
do appreciate the well-made movie, the well-written script, and that's something that I think, you know, in that case, the training, being a film studies major and just having seen gazillions of movies and have read a lot of histories and just being, going down many, many rabbit holes, you learn to appreciate craft. You learn to see it, and
Okay.
and that's true of any subject that you're interested enough in to want to master a knowledge about, whether you're
Okay.
doing it professionally or you're doing it just a fan or a collector.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that anyone can appreciate a master craftsman, like somebody who devotes their time and effort concertedly for a very long time to one particular pursuit. In this instance, it's the movie experience,
Mm-hmm.
the directing, but just sitting there, I mean, even if it's not your cup of tea, like it's something that you're not super interested in, but to sit there and observe somebody's work where they just put so much time and effort into it, it's really quite an experience.
It really is. You know, Hitchcock is the example a lot of people use to say, here's somebody who is so focused on craft that the craft becomes obvious and enjoyable as you're watching. Um, and it's really almost the art of the craft. Um,
Hmm.
and Spielberg does that as well, I think.
So
As do
what?
certain other directors, Ryan Johnson, who I
Okay.
mentioned earlier, I think is a craftsman in the old school sense, and that is a real part of the enjoyment of watching his films.
Okay. I'm definitely gonna have to check out some of his movies. You said he's the Knives Out director, correct?
Knives Out director,
Knives Out.
directed
Okay.
Looper. He
Very.
directed a movie called Looper. Again, that Star Wars movie that I love and that other people think just absolutely detest because I think um, because they cast a different crowd of people than they usually cast in one of those movies, and I think it bothered some people.
So, okay, you said The Last Jedi he directed.
Yes,
So that's episode 8, or is that episode?
it's the second to the last one.
Yeah, that's okay. So episode 8, The
Yep.
Last Jedi. That's one with Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker comes. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. All
Yep.
right, very good. No, I appreciated that movie. I thought it was a bit different. You think it's the best though,
I think it's
out of
I
the
think it's
three?
I think it's the best directed. Um,
Best directed. Okay.
Best directed, the most visual. There are scenes in that. It's like some scene on the planet where that's covered in white rock, but as people
Yes.
move across it,
Yeah,
it,
it turns
it
red.
exposes the
Yeah.
red beneath. Just
Yeah.
visually,
Yep.
he's just got this masterful eye and a way of constructing, again, scenes with old school craft, that I don't necessarily see in some of the other Star Wars movies.
Okay.
So I do think it's the best crafted. I don't know, and I know people would argue with me on some of that, but I really enjoyed that one.
I definitely agree with you on the that one scene
Mhm.
where they're on that planet I remember sitting in a theater the first time I saw that, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like it is just from a visual standpoint, just stunning. Where you have, it's covered in white. It almost looks like it's snow, but maybe it's like a dried out bed of some sort, and then there's salt or something like that underneath,
Yeah,
and it turns red as you move across it. Yeah, I remember being kind of breathtaken by that particular
yeah.
scene in the movie. But anyway, while we're on the topic of directors, I wanted to ask you about two because I'm a huge fan of science fiction. So I'm
Hmm.
very curious as to what you think about these two directors. So the first one is Christopher Nolan.
Hmm.
What are
Wait,
your
wait.
thoughts? Yeah, what are your
Um,
thoughts on Christopher Nolan's films? In
um,
particular,
yes.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
In particular, which one?
Well, I loved Interstellar just because I'm a huge sci-fi nut. So I thought
Uh-huh.
that one was really cool. A lot of people have enjoyed his most recent work, Tenet. I thought it was a bit discordant, and
Oh,
he
like that.
really failed to
Yeah,
pull everything together on that
yeah.
one. So I was
Um,
not too pleased with Tenet, but I really enjoyed Interstellar.
I blow hot and cold on him.
Okay.
I mean, I think what's the one with Guy Pearce, the early one, the mnemonic.
Oh, Memento.
Memento. Thank you.
Yes.
I think that's a brilliant movie.
Yeah.
I think Inception is pretty incredible. I thought Tenet
Yes.
was incomprehensible. Um,
Yes. I agree.
Interstellar, I remember liking. I don't have strong memories of it. It's a movie that I probably could go back to and look at again. Um, I feel, and his Batman movies, I feel are. I think Christian Bale's great in them, but I feel like they're so heavy um, in ways that don't resonate with me, in ways that um, feel a little self-important to me.
Okay.
Um, so I'm probably in the minority on that one. And I remember when The Dark Knight came out, and I was at a I was at a function, at a family function, which a bunch of young teenagers came up to me because they knew I was a film critic, and they were like, "Do you think the Dark Knight is the best movie ever made?" And that was sort of the hype around it when it came
Yeah.
out, in part because of Heath Ledger having died. And no, I don't think it's the best movie ever made. I think it's a pretty good Batman movie. But so yeah, um, I feel like people hold him up on the level of Kubrick, and I don't think he's quite there. But I also think he's an incredibly skilled movie maker, and I'm always going to be interested in what he does next.
Hmm.
I think again, this is somebody who is quite brilliant at craft, um, and um, and that's great. It's great to see. So who's the other one?
So the other one, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing his last name incorrectly, because I think he's French Canadian, is Denis Villeneuve or
Villeneuve.
Villeneuve?
Villeneuve.
Villeneuve. Yeah,
Yeah.
Villeneuve. He most recently did Dune.
Right.
Before that, he did Arrival. He also did Blade Runner 2045. It seems like he's been primarily focusing on almost like science fiction for
Right.
his past
Right.
couple movies.
Another director who I feel takes himself way too seriously. I just
Okay.
wish his movies weigh a ton. At the same time, there are some of them that I think are I adore. I love Arrival. I think that's a
Yeah.
really good movie. I was really much more taken with Dune than I was expecting to be. I think as Blade Runner redo and meh, the world can live without it. It didn't add anything to my mind. He I just wish he'd lighten up a little bit. I would love to see him try a comedy, although that might be a disastrous idea. Um, Again, both he and Nolan think big, and that's really great. And they
Hmm.
think outside the box, and that's really great. And they visualize things that we've never really visualized before, and that's really great. I sometimes miss the pop joy that comes from sitting down in a movie and just being picked up and taken away.
Hmm.
And I got that in Arrival, just because the level of visualization was so, you could tell he was just totally grooving on that. And So again, somebody I'll always be interested in what he does next, but also sort of aware, and he is very, both Nolan and he are very, very keen on insisting on the primacy of the theatrical experience and the celluloid experience. for as much digital effects as they have in their movies. They love movies. They love movies. They grew up loving movies, and you cannot fault a director who has that much love for movies. At the same time, I think Villeneuve, he's a bit of a legend in his own mind, and that's cruel to say. I've done interviews with him where he is, clearly just he's not egotistical. He's just really into what he's doing.
Okay.
But I am a little wary of certain directors who, and maybe not themselves taking them seriously, but everything around them treating what they do as major portents, major cultural portents. And I don't know, you can get burned that way sometimes.
I see. So I think what you said about Dennis is definitely fair. I did absolutely love Arrival though. I mean, I think what I like most about Dennis is I think that I just love the way he films. I don't know, every scene seems to be so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I really saw that come forward in his Blade Runner movie. I mean, I didn't really like the story too much in 24 in the Blade Runner 2045, but just the way that he filmed it, the sets, the different colors, I just thought it was breathtaking. I thought it
Yeah.
was a beautiful film in that sense.
Right. Right.
I thought the acting was pretty good. I mean, I love Harrison Ford. I like Ryan Gosling. I didn't think the story was that interesting.
Right.
So
And story's got to be there unless
yeah,
you're pointedly saying this is not about story.
yeah.
And there are movies that do that and do that well. Movies that are much more about atmosphere. So,
But I absolutely, Arrival, I just thought hit all the boxes for me.
yep.
Personally, I thought it was filmed just beautifully. The acting was great. Amy Adams, I think that's the name of the actress who was
Yes.
the primary focus. And then you have Jeremy Renner in there as well. And I thought that those two, the chemistry between them was definitely palpable. And I thought it was good. And then just the way, so of course I like the alien aspect of it, the sci-fi, the way that they're trying to solve this problem, and just the way it was filmed too, from how it had the cutscenes. You think she's doing flashbacks, but she's not. She's
Correct.
doing, yeah, it's just,
Yes.
I just was like,
Don't give it away.
I
Yeah.
don't want to give it away, but yeah, I definitely don't want to give it away, but it's just something that kind of, it was a nice little twist that throws you that he threw in there. I just thought it was a wonderful movie,
Right.
which just
And
kind of
that's
set me down that path of really enjoying like this
right.
director and being excited about what it is that he's producing. And I enjoyed
And
Dune too, so
you come out of Arrival thinking about it and
yeah,
replaying it in your head because, as you said,
yeah,
it's told in a way. It's told in a way that tricks you.
yes,
In a way that
precisely.
that tricks you in a way not unfairly, but tricks you in a way that makes you come out pleasurably feeling like you've been had and wanting to sort of replay it in your head and put the pieces back to sort of line them up
Yeah.
in chronological order and go, oh, that's what's happening there.
Yeah, no, yeah. If you are leaving a movie and you can't stop talking about it and stop thinking about it,
Mhm.
I think that the director did a very good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another one, we were talking about Christopher Nolan. While my favorite movie of Nolan is Interstellar, just because I'm a huge sci-fi nut and I
Mhm.
love the black holes and the wormholes and stuff like that. But I think his best movie, Memento, was great, by the way. I mean, very different in the way he pieces things together, and it's just a completely different movie. But I absolutely loved Inception.
Yeah.
Inception was one of those movies I just could not stop thinking about. It was so different. The visuals were breathtaking. The directing was fantastic. The acting was so good. Leonardo DiCaprio was the lead on that. But just all the surrounding characters too. I was like, wow. I was like kind of blown away by that movie.
You think the
And
top falls over?
what's that?
You think the spinning top falls
Yeah,
over?
that's it. Like I couldn't decide. I mean that's it's like one of those movies when I walked out of it and I was talking to friends about it. I was talking to family. I was like, what's
Mhm.
going on here? What are they doing here? I mean, I love that movie so much that I even went as I think one Halloween I was a character from Inception. Nobody knew what I was, but I was
Yeah.
the really like well-dressed individual and I was carrying around one of the totems, the one that Leo
Uh-huh.
had.
Yep.
And like I was a character for Halloween. That's how much I loved
Mhm.
Inception. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
this movie
Well,
is
that's
just so
we
different.
do with the movies we love, we do
Yeah.
strange things.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of what makes movies wonderful. But Anyway, all right. So the movie industry in general has gone through shifts over the past, 10, 15 years. The advent of Netflix and other types of streaming, newer technologies. Are you, happy about the direction that things are moving? Are you kind of like, well, new technologies, it's, as we touched on a little bit earlier, they just kind of happen. You have to adapt to them. I mean, what are your thoughts in general with the whole
Well, I
streaming thing?
mean, it's this is one reason I left the Boston Globe
Okay.
after 19 years was that I felt among them, a bunch of different reasons. I've been in one place for 2 decades. It was time to try something new. But I also felt that the way that newspapers and magazines, not just the Globe, the way they cover movies and review movies, no longer reflects the way we watch them,
Mhm.
which is increasingly at home on streaming, or in different formats. And the other thing that I made me want to start the watch list, the email newsletter that I'm doing now, was that you have Netflix, right?
Yes,
Do you have Amazon Prime?
I do.
Do you have Hulu?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have Disney Plus? Do you have HBO Max? Do you have Criterion Channel? Do you have Peacock? Do you have Paramount Plus? Um,
So I don't have all of those that you mentioned,
right.
but I do have access to, and I say I have access because, as you know, it's a problem with the streaming services and something you're trying to push back on is password sharing. So I have access to a lot of these services because other
Mhm.
people that I know have access and they share. But yeah, I have access to HBO Max. I have a Peacock subscription right now because it gets paid for through like one of my credit cards or something like that,
Mhm.
some sort of promotional thing. I tried out Paramount Plus for a little bit, but I ended up canceling because I don't want to have too many subscriptions going at the same time.
Right. So
What else
you're
do I have?
you're
I
you're
don't
like
have Disney Plus, but I'm a streamer. Yeah, I mean
right.
I
You're
have
like
access.
everybody.
I'm mostly yeah, I'm like a lot of people where I don't have a cable subscription. I just have internet, so I just kind of have access to these subscription services where there's yeah, these streaming services.
Right. And like me and like everybody else, you have to think about which ones do you subscribe to. Are there some that like you don't even remember that you subscribe to? So
Yeah.
there's all of these out there, but we have no idea what's on them aside from the little tier, the top tier that they're promoting that week when you go to the homepage. Um, they all have these incredible libraries of movies, new, old, and TV shows. So the idea of the watch list is 2 or 3 times a week in your inbox, you get an email from me saying, here's a good movie on Hulu or on Netflix, and it came out 10 years ago, or it came out last week, or and it could be a comedy, and it could be a foreign language film, it could be an action film, could be a documentary. And I often will sort of talk about the new movies in theaters as well. So every Friday I kind of, here's the ones that are in theaters and also premiering on demand. um, so just to be a guide to help people find good movies, because remember what it was like to go, are you old enough to remember going into video stores,
I am, yeah. I
and
remember that Blockbuster.
you'd try and pick a movie and your eyes would just glaze over after like the second shelf, and you just grab something you were familiar with. So the Ty Burr's watch list is an attempt to help you and me and everybody I know find a way through that just overwhelming amount of content. So that's the downside to the streaming revolution. There are too many channels. There's too much content. There's too many great TV shows. And when I say too many, well, it's great for the Hollywood production community and for writers and directors and crew. They're all, everybody's working. And but there's only so many hours in the day. And I do think that we're going to see some kind of consolidation at some point. Right now, each studio has its own proprietary streaming platform. It used to just be Netflix and Amazon, and now, Universal's getting in with Peacock, and Warner Brothers has HBO Max, and Disney has Disney Plus, and everybody's got one. And they're putting their stuff behind, gate. You have to pay for it, which is another reason I say that, don't forget about physical media. If there's a movie you love, get it on disc, and
Hmm.
because that way it will never be taken away from you, or you won't have to keep paying every time you want to see it. Remember when we owned stuff, when we owned, music,
Yeah.
um, and even books, because if you've got an e-reader, you don't own a book anymore; you rent it. Um, so I'm a big fan of physical media, as you can see by my shelf. Um,
You have a few books over
I have a few
there.
books, and the tops is all DVDs and Blu-rays. Um, am I happy about it? Happy is the wrong word. Technology happens.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in it. I was interested, back at Entertainment Weekly, I was the first person by 30 seconds, as there anywhere in any company back in 1994, the first person by 30 seconds to go, "What's this World Wide Web thing?" Oh, that meant you were the expert. Um, you know,
Okay.
which meant I actually hand coded Entertainment Weekly's first web page, because nobody else. It's fine. I'll learn HTML. Before they had apps that would do that. So I'm always interested in technology. I'm always interested in the stories that get told by using it, and the way we amuse ourselves using it. I think we're in a period of there are periods of consolidation where, when you only have three network channels, and there's periods of upheaval where everybody's trying to get in and make some money and try out new things, and that's where we are now. And I don't know when that's going to end or how it's going to shake out. I don't think it's going to be shake out in the interest of the consumer. I
Hmm.
think shake out in the interest of the um, intellectual property owners, the corporations
Yeah.
that own the films, and they do not have your or my interest at heart. They want to just keep us paying. So it pays to be creative about thinking your way through that maze. And I'm a proponent of what I call toggling, which means unsubscribing from a service, like subscribing to Hulu for a month so you can watch the series that you want to watch, and then going online and not forgetting to unplug.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's a pain. It's a pain in the butt. But anyway, um, that's the world we're living in now, and that's the world I'm trying to help people navigate with Ty Burr's watch list.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, a lot of players have, as you said, entered into the game since Netflix disrupted the industry. And it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. And it's definitely not in the interest of the consumer. It's always about maximizing profits because, these are publicly traded companies, so that's what they want to do. So I don't know exactly what that's going to lead to. And maybe, like you said, starting to own physical copies is as kind of an insurance is the way to move forward. I know my dad is a huge proponent of that. My dad actually got me into film at one point.
Mm-hmm.
He was big into acting, and he ended up
Uh-huh.
going to college and he was an English major, and I think what he really wanted to do was write screenplays and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
he ended up having me pretty young, and then his life took a different course. But he has an expansive movie collection of all these wonderful Blu-rays and like DVDs that he's collected over the years. And while he is subscribed to streaming services, the movies that he likes in particular, he always buys.
Right.
And
That's a wise
for
move.
example, yeah, exactly. And what I noticed recently is that some of these Blu-rays are offering a digital download as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I recently watched with him because we get together and watch movies every once in a while because that's what we do. That's how we bond. We love movies.
Mm-hmm.
Is Ghostbusters Afterlife, huge Ghostbusters fans. So
Uh-huh.
he's like, I just bought this Blu-ray DVD. We watched that, and he was asking me if I had purchased a copy yet, and I was like, no, I haven't gotten around to it yet. I think I was thinking about buying on like Amazon or something like that. He's like, well, this Blu-ray came with a free digital. I'm not going to use it, so why don't you just take it? So I think that's kind of interesting how with the DVDs these days, in order to entice the buyers, what they're doing is offering you both a hard copy and a digital.
Right. And
So
where does the digital live? I guess it stays on the.
yeah, so there's a particular company that owns the rights to distribute that, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
with the DVD companies, and then you can link up various streaming accounts. So for me, I linked my Amazon Prime to this
Yes.
particular company, and then I now have it available on my Prime account.
Right. But
So
again, if for whatever reason that copyright goes away,
Yep.
that movie goes away. So,
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good point. So then I would have to maybe I'll have to buy it again. So
right.
yeah, the whole digital space is interesting these days. So
Yeah.
one thing I did want to ask you before I let you go here, Ty, is we live in a world that's very driven by science and engineering, and sometimes the arts get pushed to the side.
Mm.
And I'm just curious as to your thoughts to how art, being a movie critic, which is clearly an art, watching these wonderful movies throughout the years, how it's helped you to, I suppose, like think more creatively about the world.
Mm.
Because sometimes we get stuck in our boxes, like I was talking earlier with science. Engineering is like this too, where you have a checklist
Yeah.
and it's very objective. And sometimes we forget to, I suppose, think a little bit more creatively. So I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think of movies as a 2 hour, generally speaking, more or less, window onto every movie is a window onto a different planet. Is a way of looking, looking through this window onto a different experience, a different way of thinking, behaving, and the more of those windows you look through, the broader you are as a person. It's not lived experience, but it's mediated experience, if you will. It's experience taken in, and we all know movies that, well, Avatar is an example of one that literally it's a window onto another planet that feels very, very real because of how it was filmed. But I'm thinking of movies that one of my favorite movies is a Iranian film called Where's the Friend's House. It's about 20 years old. Incredibly lovely fable about young children. It tells a story about human kindness that is one of the most moving things I've ever seen. And it's set in a tiny village in Iran, in like the desert, a mountain village. And literally, I'm looking into a world that I would never have been able to appreciate otherwise, that I didn't know was there.
Mhm.
And really making a connection with these characters as humans like myself, and having experiences in ways that broaden anybody who sees that movie. And it's, and you can say the same thing about something that's a total entertainment. Um, every movie is a 2 hour window, and the more of those you see, the better. But I will also say, to your point, we always we always have wanted to tell ourselves and each other stories. And back 2000, 3000, 4000 years ago, so we call those myths,
Mhm.
and sagas and epics about heroes and gods. And movies, once we learned how to make these machines that could throw those stories on a wall, with gods that we call movie stars, they're still stories. They're still stories, and we tell ourselves those stories because we want to see what will happen if we do one thing or another. What happens if you get too proud? What happens if you get too ambitious? What happens if you fall in love with the wrong person? The stories act that out and act as warnings and cautionary tales, but also aspirations and hopes and encouragements, and sometimes all of those at once. Science doesn't do that. Science quantifies, and and reveals. Art makes connections, and again, when I say art, it can be very abstract, but it's still speaking to you emotionally in ways that something more concrete can't touch. Um, you know, the there's a famous line from a Jean-Luc Godard film where he trots out a Hollywood director named Sam Fuller and asks him what's cinema, and he says cinema is love, hate, greed, anger, in a word, emotion.
Mm.
And that's what we go to be transported by. I mean, even documentaries, the well-made documentary transports you and makes you feel something. And so in that way, it's accessing a different part of your brain than science does, which can also, STEM field can lead to incredible awe, but a different, in a different compartment of the brain than
Yeah.
great art does. So I hope that sort of helps answer your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I definitely agree with you. I think that art is super important, and which is why a lot of times you see people try to integrate the arts into STEM, and they call it STEAM. They're
Yes.
trying to bring into this creativity, and I just think it's so important. And that, people joke about the starving artist all the time, and it's like this is such an important aspect of who we are as humans, and
Mm-hmm.
it just shouldn't be pushed to the periphery. And I know that people appreciate movies, but you think in music and whatnot, but it's only a select few individuals really that are at the pinnacle of their game that really get pushed in front of all of these to the masses. And there's a lot of people who would like to go down this route, but they just can't because they're not able to support themselves financially.
Right.
And maybe if society valued it a little bit more and appreciated what the arts brings to human culture, that yeah, that more people would be able to do it and think more creatively. I think it's an integral aspect too of science, what I do, like learning how to think more creatively and trying to figure out how I can branch out into different aspects of human culture in order to be able to do that. And one of the things I love to do is I like to draw. I like to, I'm not doing it now, but create music, play
Mm-hmm.
musical instruments or
Mm-hmm.
watch movies. Like I'm big into, and this stems from my dad, as I was talking about earlier, but just the enjoyment of film in general, going out and seeing movies and then trying to analyze it, appreciating the directing, the acting, the writing, etc. So, but anyway, Ty, it's been a wonderful conversation. I just want to thank you so much again for stopping
Thank
by.
you.
Where can people connect with you online?
Okay, so if you go to your browser and type in tyburswatchlist.substack.com, and maybe you can put it up on the on the website, the link. tyburswatchlist.substack.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. It is free. There is a paid component. If you want to pay, you will get extra content. You'll be able to comment, and I will thank you very much. And because this is how I'm making my living now.
Yeah.
And but I like writing and I like talking about movies. So, like I said, 2 or 3 times a week, you'll get something from me. And hopefully it will lead you to, I figure if it leads you to like 3 or 4 good movie experiences or good viewing experiences you wouldn't have had otherwise, then hopefully it'll be worth it.
All right, wonderful. Anyway, for those of you that are stopping by, thank you so much. I really hope that you enjoyed the conversation. I know it's a bit different than what we normally do, but I love movies and I couldn't pass this opportunity up to talk to Ty here about what he's doing, all the different movies that are coming out, and how to think more creatively through the arts. Definitely go ahead and share the episode, hit that like button, reach out. We always love hearing from you, and stay tuned for more great content coming your way. Take care.